This program is designed to provide general information with regards to the subject matters covered. This information is given with the understanding that neither the hosts, guests, sponsors, or station are engaged in rendering any specific and personal, medical, financial, legal, counseling, professional service, or any advice. You should seek the services of competent professionals before applying or trying any suggested ideas. Ahoy! Captain David Gallimore welcomes you aboard the Regenerate Show, live Mondays, 10 a.m. Pacific on K4HD Radio at k4hd.com. We dive into the real messy work of transforming our lives, leadership, and organizations. Bring your hot mess and confusion. Leave with clarity, courage, and confidence. Together, let's strengthen our resilience, accelerating the health of ourselves, people, planet, and profits. Now, here's your host, Captain Dave, your personal regenerator. All aboard!
Ahoy, and happy Monday. I'm here in my car in the parking lot outside Discount Tire. Talk about the messy middle of personal and professional transformation. I was on my way this morning to visit my 96-year-old mom, Bobby, as I prepare her to move from one assisted living to a new assisted living, which we'll talk about more in depth in a moment as it relates to the topic today, which is personal branding. I'm also going to talk about Discount Tire because on my way to visit my mom and then to do this radio show, my front passenger tire blew. And interestingly, I haven't had a tire blow probably in 35 years. And usually, maintenance is safety, safety, safety. And the last maintenance I did was earlier this year, and it had plenty of tire tread and tires look great. The brakes look great, but life happens. So here we are. So thanks for your flexibility, and thanks to Rebel, our producer, for doing the magic despite where I am and obstacles I throw in her way. So this show is a safe space for true and vulnerable stories. It's about the messy middle, as I mentioned, and we need these stories more than ever. And hopefully the stories that I share today will be, something that you can relate to. It's just life, right? When tires don't do what they're supposed to do, but great experiences can emerge, and that's what I want to focus on today. I'm here to point to hope. We know that there's a lot of change that's testing our resilience and our ability to come together in our communities, in our families. And I believe that one of the best strategies to make this happen is called regeneration. And I'm drawing from 3.8 billion years of Mother Earth, life's own logic. And this is going to be the topic for next week's show when I once again turn the mic on myself. Every living system, ourselves, our families, our communities, and eventually our planet, they're all in the process of growing and dying and reborn, rebirthing and growing and dying. That cycle just is part of life. And how do we leverage that cycle in a way that we can grow our own capabilities, given all the changes of climate and generative AI replacing people's jobs, all the uncertainty, geopolitical and economic. So that's the purpose of this, to lift purpose-driven leaders like yourselves up and connect them with bonds of love, adventure, creating, building, leadership, and impact. And as a lifelong learner, I get to live my ikigai, my reason for being, which was the topic of last week's show. So if you're a longtime crew or just joining us for the first time, welcome aboard. And I hope you'll discover something today that changes how you see yourself and what is possible. And please share this with someone who might need it and be their teacher. And if we can continue to pay it forward, I think we can collectively make greater and greater ripples of positive change in the world. So here's my promise. First, let's have some fun today. Second, I hope to leave you inspired. And third, to leave you with just one thing that you can apply before you put your head on your pillow tonight. So grab a pen. Transformations happen here. So the theme for this week is regenerate you and uncovering, not manufacturing, not creating, but uncovering your true brand from the inside out. So what if your brand, how others truly experience you, isn't something you invent or manufacture or create, but it's something that you uncover? Kind of like what we did with the core values a couple of weeks ago, and then our ikigai, the reason for being, in last week's show. When it comes to branding and personas, I've selected over the years a fairly simple 12 categories of branding. There are 12 characters, any one of which lives inside us. Sometimes we have more than one, kind of a mashup. And some of the titles for these personas include the explorer, the hero, the sage, the lover, the boy or girl next door, the creator, and more. And they're quietly shaping how we lead, connect, and show up. Most people never meet their brand persona, so their brand gets built by accident instead of on purpose. So this week, I'm turning the mic on myself again. Thank you for your patience as I line up guests once the summer holiday season winds down a bit. And so naming your true brand will let you helm and show up authentically in a world overrun, in my personal opinion, with performative leaders, performative influencers, companies that write something on the can that's far different than what's in the can, inside the can. And we know that there's just this progression toward a lot of AI generated content, images. I just spoke with a person whose their company is working on generating feature films through AI. But there's just a lot of AI slop, isn't there? And so if ever there was a time for more authenticity and clarity about who each of us are and how we want others to experience us in the world, I think this time has never been more important. So I'm going to tell a few stories, share some tools. I'm hopeful that my last minute sending of the Regenerate You playbook will be able to be viewed. And so Rebel, don't worry
It
about
is.
that. We're just going to, it is, thank you. Appreciate you so much. Rebel's always working the magic behind the scenes for me. So we'll hold off just for a little bit when we get into the part 3 of our 3-part series here today. So one thing that I wanted to highlight is, what is brand? So some people might think of brand or branding as the organization's colors, their fonts, their logo, their marketing tagline. And it is that, but frankly, those are just representative of the company's experience. And it's a shorthand that they provide us, the client, the customer, the partner, the employee. And so when you think about great brands that you love, the first one that comes to mind for me is Apple. So I've been in tech for 40 plus years, started out at IBM, and I've used Windows, Intel laptops and desktops for a good chunk of my career because that's often what corporations prefer to purchase. They're less expensive than Apple and other gadgets. Um, but when I left Boeing back in 2005 and started my business, uh, I didn't have an IT department in my back pocket. And so I decided to buy my first Apple MacBook. And oh my gosh, what a difference in that experience. First of all, you buy the gadget and it's in really quite lovely packaging. In fact, I keep a lot of my Apple product boxes for other purposes. You've heard me say I'm Scottish. I know how to stretch a penny. And so just the experience of buying it at the Apple store is also a remarkable thing to do, or buying it online. I've done both. And then you open the box and it's just the manufacturing of the box. And then you power up the gadget, whatever it might be, iPhone, iPad. In this case, it was my first laptop. And they've graciously added battery power to it. So I don't have to wait 15 or 20 minutes to charge the thing. It's all ready to go. And the first thing that I couldn't believe was when I opened it, my printer's connected, I already had an iPhone, so that connected, and just stuff worked right out of the box. Unlike the Wintel world, where you had to wait to charge it for a little bit, and then you had to add drivers, and God forbid if you got the wrong driver, then you'd have to undo that driver and find a different one. So yeah, it was always quite a challenge. And then of course, when I had a question in the Wintel world, I had, my company's IT department to call, and they would come over and fix whatever was needed to be fixed. But in the Apple world, I didn't have an IT department, so I was able to call Apple, and thankfully, they've always invested in really strong customer support people. They do great hiring, they do awesome onboarding and training, and they're generally always very good with their English speaking. And so I would be able to get whatever issues resolved. Computers always have little bumps in the night and speed bumps and things. So, nothing's perfect, but how Apple shows up and how they handle those bumps in the night, I was really impressed. And so that brand experience that Apple has created, they've first of all defined it. What kind of a company are they in the world? They're not the least expensive manufacturer of gadgets. They care about design, as proven by investing in a lovely box that you can keep and reuse for other purposes. And they're all about making it easy. So you just plug it in and it works. And I think the last thing I'll say about the brand experience of Apple is everything just connects. So in this world of multiple gadgets, so Apple Watches and iPhones and iPads and the MacBook Pro that I'm using today since I'm on the road with you, plus the iCloud, it just all works. And I can't remember the last time I had what we used to fondly call the blue screen of death, where you'd have to do Control Alt Delete to get rid of that error message, which was basically just a blank blue screen, or you'd have to hard reboot your machine, which was always really frustrating because invariably it had the blue screen of death when I had just almost finished a document or an email, and then of course it completely evaporated. This was of course back in the 80s and 90s. So think of brand as this experience that companies are defining. And other great examples, I'd like to highlight are the Westin Marriott. So when I was a business traveler, and now as a business and personal traveler with my wife Margaret, we love the Westin brand experience, part of the Marriott family of hotels. And you just know what you're going to get, and you get a little bit more than you expect. And it, for the price point that we're willing to pay, or that my business is willing to pay, now that I'm an owner of a business, I'm very frugal about travel. It's a good, consistent brand experience. I sleep really well on the Westin Heavenly bed. Pretty good on the Marriott beds, but definitely when my wife and I go to travel, we really enjoy the Heavenly bed from Westin. And the food is consistently good. The service is consistently good. You know what you're getting. You know what to expect. Delta Airlines, when I was traveling a lot, 100% road warrior for 8 years, I had a bad brand experience with United, where they were delayed 3 times in a row, and I was taking red eyes and showing up in New York late to my own meetings, my own stand-up meetings that I was supposed to be leading. And it was really hard because I was a 1K flyer, and so I had to kick the United to the curb because I just couldn't trust them. And my client was really getting quite upset with me. And so I wasn't going to leave on Saturday and completely ruin my weekend. So I had to leave. I had to change airlines. And Delta was the next best rated. And oh my gosh, what a night and day experience. Just always tell you what's going on. They had a much better app. So I knew where my luggage was at any given time if I was checking bags. I usually check a traveling guitar, and wanted to make sure that that was safe. Another great brand, and we've been a diehard fans, rabid fans like of Apple, but with Toyota and Lexus, they just run. Patagonia is another great brand experience that I've had. Rolex, you get exactly what is on the can, and that chronometer just stays plus or minus a couple seconds, regardless of where I am on the ocean or what I'm doing. I don't have to worry about batteries. And God forbid, knock on wood, if I was ever taken over by pirates, I could probably bargain my way out, trade my life for my Rolex. So my wife said, "You spent how much on that watch?" That's like almost a couple kitchen appliances. But for me, it was an amazing purchase that I enjoy every day when I look at it and ask myself, what's one thing I could do that would help me be worthy of this quality of craftsmanship? And then the last story I want to tell before we start part 2 is my experience with Discount Tire. So normally I would buy tires at Costco, sometimes at Midas if other work was getting done. But I discovered Discount Tire when I was driving by and I had a flat tire. It was a slow leak. It was I was able to keep pumping it up. So I shouldn't say it was a flat tire. It was a slow leak tire. Interestingly, on the front passenger. And I was near this place called Discount Tire, didn't know much about them. And this person comes out from the counter, which I thought was quite unusual, shook my hand, asked me my name, gave me his name, and then proceeded to fit me in because he saw the desperate look on my face, needing to get on the road. Seems like whenever there's a tire or car problem, it's because I need to get somewhere right away. Isn't that funny how life is? So he fit me in, and they put a plug in to replace a screw that I had run over on the road not too far away from Discount Tire. So that was an amazing experience. And especially because it cost me nothing. I thought, wow, how do they do this? They take 15 or 20 minutes out of their own schedule, their own resources to serve somebody and not charge them anything. But now I understand why they do that, because when I had the blown tire yesterday, I immediately thought of going to Discount Tire, partly as a thank you, but partly as, these guys are really good with that first experience. I wonder how they'll be with this experience. And of course, they did a brilliant job of designing and executing, I would say, a flawless experience, because again, I showed up at 8 o'clock when they opened. There were a ton of customers in the lobby and all getting their cars worked on because they had scheduled their car. I didn't do that. They were closed on Sunday, so I had to come in first thing on today, 8 a.m. And just like it happened the first time several months ago, the um, service person came out from behind the counter, introduced himself, shook my hand, asked me my name. I told them what I wanted to do. They have this little digital device. They immediately followed me out to my vehicle and did a walk around, and asked me what I was wanting to do. And that took maybe 3 or 4 minutes. We walked back to the counter, and they give me a few options. They educate me on what's possible with this Lexus SUV, that we want to rainy Seattle weather, wet streets, but also we want to be up in the mountains, snow and ice. So it's really an all-weather tire. And then he said, have you ever thought about getting your spare tire to be a full-sized spare? Nobody ever asked me that. And I recognize the value of that, because you can't drive more than 50 miles an hour on a regular, smaller spare tire. You risk blowing that tire if you exceed that miles per hour. Well, what if all of this craziness that happened on Sunday had been, somewhere on the highway, and then I put the spare on and I'm not able to go more than 50 miles an hour? It would have been a real challenge. So I said yes to that. And then they came back after a few minutes and said, hey, we probably recommend you get an alignment, which I said, yeah, that makes sense. And then they managed my expectations as to how long it would take. The price was fair. I still had to bite hard, because you basically have to buy 4 tires. You can't just buy the one, because in this case, I didn't know if my tires were just getting older. So apparently, if they're older than 6 years old, the sidewalls can get squishy. That's a technical term. And so I thought, okay, I'll just bite the bullet, because we usually drive our cars until we can't drive them any longer. They're fully depreciated. And so I said okay to all of the recommendations. And then he said, and you'll be done about 9:30. And of course, the radio show starts at 10 a.m. And I'm thinking, uh-oh. But, just trust, have faith. And they got all the work done by about 9:25. So they're 5 minutes early, which I'm always impressed when an organization can manage expectations that closely. So bad brand experiences, and then we'll go to a commercial break. My mom's assisted living. I won't mention the brand, because I don't want to necessarily do them harm. But for my mom and I, it's been less than stellar. My mom pays almost $9,000 a month to live and receive 24/7 care. Not small change. And I'm sure many of you listeners have similar situations where a loved one is in assisted living, and it's really expensive. And so you would hope that you would get decent care. Well, on 2 occasions when I visited my mom, there was nobody in the common area. Lots of residents, 30, 35 residents, but not one person. And in assisted living, bad things can happen like in a moment. So that kind of woke me up to the fact that maybe this team is understaffed. I talked to the general manager. He said, no, we're fine. We're in the process of hiring people. They asked me to pay, or asked my mom and I to pay more because my mom needed a little bit more care. And then this is just bad luck, I think, more than anything. But a week after we spent another $1,000 a month for extra support for my mom's toileting, she fell after toileting. And they'd promised me that they were going to have somebody always take her to and from the bathroom. And then the final straw was having to deal with this assisted living and an insurance company that's paying a lot of the bill for my mom. And the hours and hours and hours that I have to spend in reconciling and navigating different websites that aren't accurate and talking to people on the phone that are English is not their first language. So it's very challenging sometimes for me to understand them. So bad brand experience, poor design, but I would say even poor execution. What's on the label of the can sounds great, looks great, terrific graphics, right? A promise, a tagline, but then you open up the can and you use what's inside the can, and it's such a different experience than what's on the can. And so what I want to talk about after the commercial break is how do each of us take a fresh look at what is the brand experience that we want, not only with our families and friends and our community, but in our career. So it's both a personal and a professional brand. In other words, the experience that you have. You don't need to have a logo. You don't have to have a tagline. You don't have to have any of that stuff. But you need, in my opinion, you need to be as smart as the Apples and the Westons and the Patagonias and now Discount Tires, who do what they say, first of all, say what they do, and then they do what they say. They execute on that promise, the brand promise. So, Rebel, if you could start our commercial, and then we'll be right back talking about how do you set up or uncover your brand.
You're listening to Regenerate with Captain Dave, your personal regenerator on K4HD Radio. We'll be right back. Are you feeling overwhelmed? Are you ready to regenerate and live the life of your dreams? Start the transformation now. Call Captain Dave at 253-237-2558. Stop overthinking. Again, call 253-237-2558 or go to regenerativeworldgroup.com to book a free, no-obligation clarity call. Let's get back to Regenerate right here on K4HD Radio for more life-changing transformations. Here's your host, Captain Dave, your personal regenerator.
Welcome back. If you're now just joining us, we've been talking about brand experiences from a customer's perspective and some of how the best companies, like in my experience, Apple and Weston, Marriott, Delta Airlines, and just today, Discount Tire, how it makes such a difference in how we experience a positive flow in our day and great outcomes. So this is part 2 now of our theme. Let me just get back to that just briefly here. So uncovering your true brand from the inside out. So we've talked a little bit about what a brand is. It's the experience that people have. And now I want to apply that to each of you and tell you a few stories about how this came about for me. So it wasn't until I became a business coach that I recognized the value of branding. And you may have heard that companies like Disney, Coca-Cola, Apple, and others, there's billions of dollars of value. It's intangible, but it's significant value because the experience is now tied to a logo. Like when I see the Apple logo, which is a little bite taken out of a silhouette of an apple, the fruit, I know that that product is going to have a consistent experience. Similarly with other logos that we're familiar with. So I had a blind spot, before doing my coaching and helping my clients with their both personal, professional, or if they were a business client, their organizational brand. I didn't see how this branding really applied to me personally. But the insight that I received was, I wonder if I was clear about my brand experience and then created the logo, which are those waves that you've seen of people, planet, and profit. What might that mean to my own clients? And could it be a way to attract the kind of client that was looking for that kind of a consistent experience? And I should have been smarter than it took me years to figure this stuff out, again, because I didn't think about it until I was a branding or a business coach and looking at branding. But now in hindsight, I recognize that my dad, Peter, he understood the power of brand. And as a neurodiverse ADHD wired person, it was incredibly difficult growing up in our house. But my dad would always say, say what you do and do what you say. That is a person of integrity. And really, he was talking about branding. Like if I'm about to do or say or be something, I should be clear about that. So that's do what I say. And then you want to design the experience. It might be just a few minutes of design, but you're basically being conscious of, well, how am I going to deliver on what I say? And how do I make that of high quality if that's what's required? Or how do I listen to my wife, my kids better because they're a customer of me, so they have an experience of me. And I will tell you that once I figured this out, kind of reverse engineering it later in life, I recognize that when I do this well, personally in my life, the day goes really well. It flows and relationships deepen and trust improves. And when I do it well professionally, well, client trust rises. The hour that we spend together and often because many of my clients are on retainer, I try to provide additional value through texts or reviewing anything that they've written, or if I want to have a quick chat before they go into a meeting, that those experiences really enhance the outcomes that my clients are able to receive when they collaborate with me. So I've really moved away from being just exchanging time for money and really focusing on outcomes. So getting crystal clear with my clients about what is it that you really want to accomplish, and let's create a little roadmap and some accountability, some nimble support, loving, but also direct and candid support, so that things that are blocking my clients, they can remove those blocks or mitigate those blocks and keep flowing and keep moving forward and achieving the outcome that they want. So that's part of the pivot that I've been making recently to my own professional brand. So the through line about this is a brand isn't a mask. It's really who you are. It's the integrity. If you think of a building that has a strong foundation and the steel and concrete and rebar structure, the scaffolding of the inside of the building is one of integrity, that can bend in the wind but not break, that can bend but not collapse in an earthquake. My heart goes out for all of the residents in the Big Island of Hawaii, and I believe Oahu and Maui are also being impacted. But there's a lot of structures that have collapsed. They were out of integrity given those severe conditions. So this is really integrity made visible, is what we're talking about. So how do you uncover your brand? We're now going to transition to part 3 for the next 10 or so minutes. So you can't really build a persona. My belief is that you excavate or you uncover it, kind of like an archaeologist. It's a similar bias that I have with core values and with Ikigai. Personally, I think it's a good bias to have. I'm not saying it's the truth, that all of the work that you can do to create or uncover or excavate or build, whichever verb you want to use, it has to be within. It has to be something that is truly inside you. Because we human beings, and especially clients in this day and age, we've got a pretty good bullshit meter. We do. We might not be able to put our finger exactly on why we think there's a lot of BS coming out of the person who's speaking with us, or we're reading an article, or we're watching a YouTube video. But we've got a highly evolved spidey sense when somebody is misrepresenting the truth, fake news, lying to us, exaggerating. And part of the regenerate philosophy is, what would nature do? And nature doesn't have to impress anybody. Seeds sprout into small plants. The plants, with water and wind, and it turns out trees need wind to strengthen them. Trees grown in the lab where there is no wind and no force against them, they fall over. Isn't that interesting? So, this whole idea of figuring out what's inside you, I think it's worth the effort. At least it has been for myself and for so many of my clients. So what I'd like to do next is ask you, Rebel, to post the playbook. Look at you, already on it. Thank you so much. And if you could flip to the next page, or I guess I do that, right? Let's see here. Nope, she's doing that for me. Thank you so much. So I hope you can see these. These are 12 personas. Now, there's other lists of brand personas that you can Google or search on, or go to ChatGPT or Claude. But this was one that I discovered from Kay Putnam. And I've never met Kay. I just think she's simplified this whole brand persona thing brilliantly. And you'll see how I recommend her brand. She calls it a brandality quiz. You'll see that link. But here are the 12 personas, beginning with the upper left, caregiver. So many of you may relate to that. You're the kind of person that's in service to others. My wife, my daughter, my son, and I would include myself, have very much interest in that caregiver persona. The creator. Many of you love to start things, from scratch and build and create. I certainly have that persona in me. The entertainer, you love applause. You love laughter and helping make life just a little bit easier. This next one is explorer. So this is my primary brand persona, and I think it's very fitting. So when you think of explorers, right, they're going out into the world, doing things that others have not done. My regenerative coaching is probably still on the bleeding edge a little bit, but becoming more and more mainstream as people recognize that sustainability isn't going to be sufficient. Doing no harm is not going to get us the job done in bending the curve on rising global temperatures. We've had the hottest summers in Seattle ever, and certainly in Europe they've had the hottest summers ever. And the amount of forest fires, my son has an app, and it was just covered in forest fires throughout Washington State. So this is going to be our future, right? So how do I, as a regenerative life and leadership and either business or career coach, how do I help bend that curve? And so I'm using that explorer persona to describe what I do. And I'll use persona language, explorer language, also with a little bit of maritime feel to it, hence the opening and the closing of this show with some of the maritime bells ringing. 8 bells is, all is well. Trying to be subtle with it. Hopefully it's not overdone. But by being clear that I'm the Explorer brand primarily, and then aligning my services to that, and explorers, not only do they go out and explore, but they kind of need to come back. If they don't come back, they're not going to be able to tell their story. They're not going to be able to help other people. So being a good explorer means that you're also doing the planning and doing the thinking to come back. And as an explorer, transformational coach, my clients definitely want me to have them along the journey, along the adventure, and bring them home safely or bring them to their next destination safely. So you can see kind of the linkages and how it's shown up in my life as the Explorer brand. So I won't go through the rest of these, but you can read for yourselves: Guy, Girl Next Door, The Lover, The Magician. I have a dear friend who is definitely that magician. He can create something out of nothing, and he's really, really good at storytelling. And I have another client who's a real maverick, right? They just don't let anything stop them, and they're mercurial. They're maverick, I think, has so many of these other personas. And then finally, sage. I have quite a bit of sage in me. My family rolls their eyes when I say, "Can I offer you some feed forward?" And they go, "No, Dad, I don't need any more coaching. Thank you very much." So if you clicked on the link, Rebel, if you go to the next page, please, you'd be given a series of short questions. So this one is asking you to review your brand's biggest strength. And some of the selections are relating to others, curiosity, and I picked empowering others. I could have picked any one of those. And then you get to some pictures. And this was harder for me, but in this one, labeled number 3, which person feels in line with your brand's mission? And looks like the one that I picked was not one of the pictures that's on my little screenshot capture, but my understanding, it was very much that explorer picture. And as you go through the 16 questions, takes about 30 minutes, it was really uncanny as to how it picked explorer, and it fit like a glove. Now, some of my clients, it has not been such a good fit out of the box. And so what we've done is, using generative AI, we'll have a co-thinking together, the client and I, with, in this case, Claude. I used to have ChatGPT, and then I kicked them to the curb when they didn't support my values of being fair and equitable and protecting data. So we have these co-thinking, and turns out Claude knows all about brand personas. And so often what will emerge from those co-thinkings is a bit of a mashup. So I have a client who is mostly sage, quite a bit of maverick, and quite a bit of caregiver. So that's a kind of a three-way mashup. And the language, the messaging of that three-way brand persona just fit Mike like a glove. And we've had him on the show once, and then Rebel helped me out when I couldn't get to the show once. We did a rerun of the Mike Shodroff show. So if you're curious about that show, you can see that on our website. And maybe Rebel, you can post that website. That would be awesome. And the other thing would be if you could post the info at regenerativeworldgroup.com in the banner, and I would be delighted to send you my playbook as a gift to you. So please feel free to do that. Rebel, if you would change one more slide, that'd be great. So what I have clients do is just capture the screenshots when they're taking the questionnaire. And that's been useful because sometimes they may be choosing an answer that sometimes is not exactly who they are. They wish that was who they were. And I create a little bit of counterbalance to that and say, is that really you? Or what about this other option? And then they go, oh yeah, you're right. That's probably a better fit. So doing this on your own is certainly okay, but doing it with somebody else who knows you, so it could be a partner, spouse, best friend, that can be a useful validation of whatever the brand persona that the questionnaire produces for you. And I think, Rebel, you can stop showing this playbook. It's a pretty simple playbook. It doesn't have a lot of extra content behind it, other than to say, and it echoes the beginning of our episode, where if you believe, as I do, that this is something to uncover that's already inside you, and you're willing to be honest about, is that really me? Or is that who I would like to be? It's not to say that you can't morph your brand over time. Absolutely, right? Because we can all change. But out of the gate, it is really, really valuable if you can be as honest and self-aware as possible. And doing that with somebody else will facilitate that. So let me just in closing say that I wish I had been managing my brand right early on in my life, but it kind of just managed me. And if I'd been smarter about recognizing that what my dad was really teaching me was kind of a simple version of what is the brand experience, saying what you do, doing what you say. And if I could have mastered that at a younger age, when it's easier to master good habits, I would probably be in a very different place in my life and in my career. Because one of the challenges that we have, if our brand is managing us, we're not managing our brand. If we're not consistent in our execution of our design of our brand persona, that can create problems, because now there's this dissonance, right? You say one thing and you do something else. Now you're out of integrity. We talked earlier about the BS meter that people have built in. It's a evolutionary advantage, right? To be able to know who to trust and who to not trust, because then you'll not engage with them and put yourself or your resources in harm's way. So I just invite you, especially our younger listeners, our younger leaders, to really take this on, and feel free to reach out through info@regenerativeworldgroup.com. And I'd be delighted to send you the playbook. So thank you so much for being a part of, this was show 28. Can you believe it? And so next week, episode 29 is going to be on regeneration. I've touched on regeneration. Obviously, the title of this show is called Regenerate, but I really now feel that we're kind of halfway through the year-ish, that it's time now to really delve in with you about why do I believe that regeneration is probably the best strategy that I've discovered that will help us bend the curve on climate change and all of that. So thank you for investing your valuable time. On behalf of Rebel Medler, our producer, and our entire Talk4 Media team, stay healthy, stay safe, because we need you. And if you thought this show interesting, I always welcome a like, a comment. I'm going to be recommitting to responding to comments more now that the dust is somewhat settling on other parts of my life. And if you want to refer, pay it forward, I'm really grateful, because my whole purpose with this show is to help lift people up in bonds of love, adventure, creating, building, leadership, and impact. And I think we need more of that. So we're better together. So now let's go regenerate.
Thank you for listening to Regenerate with Captain Dave on K4HD Radio. We invite you to give yourself grace and embrace the messy middle. See you every Monday at 10 a.m. Pacific Time. Until then, you got this.